Welcome to the Currently Cringing podcast. I'm your host, Anisha Ramakrishna. I'm a TV personality and entrepreneur. Join me as I spill the chai on my cringeworthy life experiences with a side of dating, pop culture, and lots of laughs. Hey guys, welcome to Currently Cringing. Today my guest is Erica Doven. She's the author of Digital Body Language. Welcome.
It's so great to be here with you.
Thank you so much for taking the time to come on. And we were introduced by mutual friends, the only friends you really need, Zarna and Divya Gugnani. I don't think you need anyone else.
Nope, that's it. We're good.
If those are your friends, that's kind of all you need. But
basically, boss Desi ladies. Just
exactly.
Boss.
Incredible women doing big things. So you actually came out with the term geriatric millennial. It's your word.
That's right. The internet says that I coined the term geriatric millennial.
When did you first use it?
I first used the term geriatric millennial over brunch in New York with my girlfriends. And a lot of it had to do with the fact that we no longer felt like the young woman in the room, in the boardroom, in the cafe, at the coffee shop, at the club, wherever we were. But at the same time, we weren't Gen Xers, we weren't baby boomers. And just through casual conversations, we struck up this conversation around who we were. And I don't actually know how it spawned perfectly, but this idea of being called a geriatric millennial resonated with so many of us. First of all, we're not young millennials, especially those that, only know a world of Instagram and TikTok. We remember those cheesy AOL Instant Messenger profile names. We remember Napster. We remember a Razor flip phone. So we also know when these tools were primitive versus the ways that many people use them now. The other thing we realized is just the word millennial does not resonate with everyone. It actually spans 20 years of individuals, someone born between 1980 and 2000. And so, last year, I decided to write an article really hoping to define and understand this unique cohort I called a micro generation born between 1980 and 1985, which we both fit into. And a lot of my article I posted it on Medium, had to do with how geriatric millennials were actually really positioned well post-pandemic to lead in a hybrid world where they're just as good as reading body language because they grew up in a world where digital tools were primitive, and also just as good as maybe trying TikTok and Clubhouse. And that's really where the idea, the genesis, the article came about. And then it went viral.
I love it. I first heard it in a meme. I think it was one of the greatest millennial meme pages, I am 30 AF. But once we got in contact, you were like, yeah, I coined that word. And I was like, you need to be on the podcast because you are the face of all of us. And I love the word you used, micro generation. And I totally relate to that because I am not a complete millennial. I do feel older than the typical millennial. I do have the privilege of having a brother that is 11 years younger than me.
Yeah.
We are so different. He's a full-blown millennial. I almost feel like I'm caught between being a boomer and a millennial. We've got a little bit of both.
Hence the word geriatric millennial. And it's interesting. A lot of people when I published the piece, it went absolutely viral. It turned into a Twitter hashtag. People started using the phrase geriatric millennial in their LinkedIn and Instagram profiles. And I got a lot of hate too. People on TikTok saying that it felt offensive. Individuals that said, you shouldn't use that term in a similar way that people use the term geriatric pregnancy. And by the way, I had a geriatric pregnancy, but my response to that is, what's wrong with being old? Like, this is kind of the moment of adulting for millennials who are always seen as the young kids. we're not the young kids anymore. Many of us are 40 years old. And I think that's the opportunity we all have now to actually reflect on what was unique about this micro generation that grew up remembering how digital tools were so primitive. They remember that speed up dial connection of the internet. Yes. They remember, collect card phone calls to their parents. And they've also become savvy. So they can be a unique bridge for their parents and their younger brothers like you, or their younger employees who may not know when they actually shouldn't text back and they should actually pick up the phone and call someone.
Absolutely. And I notice it definitely on TikTok, because I myself will say I'm a geriatric millennial, and I will be having a super geriatric pregnancy when I have children, because I am 38, haven't had even a single child. So it's like the word makes perfect sense to me. I'm not offended. I have heard elder millennial, but I feel like geriatric just hits the nail on the head. We are in the end of the bracket. We're not true millennials, I feel. And I see it on TikTok. I'll say something that a Gen Z kid said. The Gen Z kid's going to get the attention because that's the audience, right? And on TikTok, I am seen as geriatric. So I do think we have that fine line where we can communicate with Gen Z and we understand the way our parents, run the world and do things. We're able to know what a fax machine is. Exactly. And we know who Phil Collins is. We listen to Phil Collins and we listen to Lil Nas.
Yeah, exactly. We actually know how to check a voicemail. Even though we don't like it always, we might want to send a voice note instead. We still know how to check it because we remember so much the first half of our lives using it in any environment, in our families, in our communities. In my book, Digital Body Language, I kind of split up the communications differences across generations. And, just like we have different traditional body language styles, we have what I call different digital styles of communication. On one end, there are those I call the digital natives. And on the other end, there are those I call the digital adapters. So a digital native might be a lot like your brother. They expect text over email. They hate a period at the end of a text message. They'll never listen to a voicemail. On the other end of the spectrum are digital adapters, a lot like our parents, right? When my Punjabi dad sends me a text message, it starts with Dear Erica, it ends with Love Dad, and I have to scroll through it because it's as long as a handwritten letter.
A letter. And
I quite taught him that a text is not the same as a letter. I also will get these random midday texts from him in all caps saying, call me now. I call back thinking and it's some emergency. He just doesn't know how to uncaps lock his messages. So, we as geriatric millennials in many ways are the bridge. We connect both of them. We can translate when dad leaves the call to make sure our brother actually listens to the message, or we text the information. We know when to send that Slack message versus when to have that in-person gathering. And I think it's because we have a patience for the digital world, but also we know how to use it and not use it in the right ways.
You're right. We're definitely seeing it in the workplace, and the future CEOs coming up in the next 10 years are going to be millennials, geriatric millennials.
Yep. That's right. Many of them are there. If you look at Jennifer Fleiss from Rent the Runway, or Mark Zuckerberg, or Alex Ohanian, the founder of Reddit. We
brought you social media.
That's right. And what I do think we have an opportunity to teach younger Gen Zers is when and when not to use these tools in the right ways, like choosing the right medium, almost giving them the lay down, right? You don't want to celebrate a baby shower on TikTok. You want to be in person. You want to have a meaningful baby shower. When you're having a group conversation, you can build meaningful connections on Instagram. And we can teach 45-year-olds that they can build community in new and different ways. And so we're learning, we're kind of all like immigrants to a new country of digital communication because every year the tools speed up. But what I would argue is that geriatric millennials have a unique opportunity to keep learning and adapting, but also to remember how important face-to-face connection and body language and just human engagement really is, and to teach others that.
Absolutely. And now your book, Digital Body Language. What is digital body language?
So we all know that research shows roughly 60 to 80% of our communication is our body language. Handshakes, head nods, lean in. But in my research, which I did over a decade, I found that body language hasn't disappeared in a digital world. It's just transformed every single day. Whether we know it or not, we are sending cues and signals that make up how others feel about us. Let me give you some examples. And I'm not just talking about Zoom video skills. So from the choice of communication medium, did you choose to email, call, video call, Slack, IGDM? Other factors, punctuation. Did you use 1 exclamation, 3, an emoji, caps? These things mean different things to different people. There was one study that found that when you have 3 exclamation points at the end of a text message, for some that can feel like urgency. For others, it feels like shouting. And for others, it feels like excitement. This is just an example of the different cues we're sending in new ways. Other examples are response time. Did you respond in 3 minutes, in 3 days? So whether we know it or not, we have a digital body language that either makes or breaks relationships now, because most of our relationships, whether we realize it or not, are truly virtual first, even if we're fully in an office with someone. When it comes to my book, what I really wanted to do was create a rule book to not give people a prescriptive way to write and communicate, but to give them the range of the different languages we speak online to help them, 1, understand the signals they send, even if they don't intend to. 2, to become more comfortable being uncomfortable, to stop judging others with first impressions in a digital setting. And last but not least, to really learn how to become fluent, like an immigrant, learning a new language in this new language, especially for those older generations where this is entirely new. And I'll sum it up with one quick story, which is a woman named Kelsey that I was coaching. She's a geriatric millennial, and she was an executive at Johnson & Johnson, and she got some feedback that her empathy was weak. And this was pre-pandemic. I was looking at all the markers of subpar empathy and inability to listen, to ask good questions. I would attend meetings with her, and it turned out she was great at all these things. When she was in a room with people, she allowed them to feel heard. She asked great questions. She had great body language. But turns out, while her traditional body language was great, her digital body language was abysmal. She would send brief, low context emails and text messages saying, send this to me right now, or where are we on this ? Question mark. She would cancel calls at the last minute, making her team feel disengaged. She would take calls while she was on video call meetings with other people, making them hold while they were waiting. And in many ways, the whole new cues of empathy just looked different. And I had to teach her what empathy and connection looks like now. And I think that example isn't just for the workplace. It translates to our friendships, where friends feel like we're on the phone all the time at dinner. It translates into our marriages and our partnerships, where in text exchanges between men and women, there are differences that we have across genders in digital communication that can turn into massive fights. And so that's just an example of the many ways we're learning how to communicate better in all parts of our lives.
I have been known to send short messages, and I've learned now to, like you said, use that digital body language, because not everyone knows what you're saying. Some might think that a short message is rude.
Absolutely. Remember, you can be intimidating, even if you don't realize it. Sometimes there are simple things that just make that light difference. Adding an emoji at the end, right? Softening the tone. Research shows that up to 50% of the time in digital communication, the tone can be misinterpreted, not just by new acquaintances, but even by family and friends. Another aspect to this is to remember to never confuse brevity with clarity. We're always doing things quickly, but we don't want to create more confusion, more angst, more overwhelm, especially at work. And I think last but not least is to choose thoughtfulness over hastiness. If there's like a back and forth, I see this with my girlfriends, my geriatric millennial girlfriends on WhatsApp, or we're texting, we're trying to plan a weekend or something. And just knowing when to stop, when the pause is necessary, especially on a Wednesday at 2 p.m. when most of us are working and we can't deal with exchanges, and pick it back up on Sunday. Sometimes even just scheduling time to have that exchange can be better. So those are just, again, some examples of I think what we all need when it comes to better communication
and now,
norms.
From your book, which everyone should read, what are some key rules? What would be your 3 most important rules?
Number 1, don't forget to show gratitude. When you write THX, that is not a thank you. It is an acknowledgement that you got someone's email. So actually show appreciation.
You're calling me out.
Just take, oh, yes, I am. Right? One line. Like, you did a great job.
Just add 3 more letters.
Yes, you don't have to be a serial exclamation point user or an emoji user, but just taking that extra time, especially for Gen Zers, makes a big difference. It is their language of connection. Number 2, when it comes to digital body language, remember that in certain cases, speed matters just as much as substance. And I'll give you an example. When you're building a first impression in person, it takes 7 milliseconds for someone to make an impression of you. Online, I like to say that quick email recap within like 20 minutes or an hour of a Zoom meeting or even an in-person meeting or some type of exchange is like the new virtual handshake. So also know when you need to be fast versus when you can take your time in any type of exchange. And then last but not least, my final tip is to remember that reading messages carefully is the new listening, and writing clearly is the new empathy. We don't talk the talk. We don't walk the talk. We write the talk. It is our brand. It represents and shapes all of our relationships around us.
I love that. And you're calling me out on everything because it also depends on who I'm writing to. But I love the thoughtfulness over hastiness because, you're writing to someone and that's what they're seeing. That's their impression of you.
Exactly. And that doesn't mean you need to respond to everything immediately. Sometimes you need time to think. I like to say, have the pregnant pause. If you're angry, if you're in a bad mood and someone sends something that seems passive aggressive or frustrating, do not respond or write a draft, leave it in your inbox, even schedule it if you have to, and check on it the next day. I've found that sometimes I would read a message. One client who said, we need to talk tomorrow, need to talk about budget. And I ruminated all night, assuming that she had no budget for a big project we had already discussed. Turns out when we got on the call, she's like, I forgot what the budget was. Can you just remind me? And it's so easy for us to just fall into our own train of thought because we don't have synchronous in-person connection as much anymore. So assume the best intent. Make sure to have that pregnant pause when you need to. And if you're really struggling, like ask a friend, ask a girlfriend, how would they interpret this? When I ask my husband, he's like, oh, they didn't mean anything. And that really brings me back to how men and women communicate digitally too. A woman could send a long, descriptive, detailed text saying like this and this and this, and a man will just say, okay. And, right? Sounds good. Or like it just like as short as possible. And we have to understand a lot, like men and women are different in in-person communication. That translates in a digital world as well.
And now you said pregnant and pause. So we're going to wrap up with your personal life because, we like to spill the chai and we're nosy. So you are a geriatric millennial. You had a geriatric pregnancy. How did you meet your husband and when did you have your children?
I met my husband in New York City on the dance floor when I was 23 years old. We sort of grew up together in New York. We're both, born and raised to Indian immigrant families, grew up in the US. And we've had to learn and relearn how to fall back in love with each other at different ages of our life. And I think the newest journey of that was after we had 2 kids. that are both under 4 years old right now. And my second was born 5 weeks before the pandemic hit. So we lived with 2 kids under 2 in COVID in New York City. We've learned that we can get through anything, but it takes real work and it takes constant practice of falling back in love with each other at different stages of our adulting. And I think for any of us that are trying to find love, that are trying to fall back in love, whatever our state is, remember, it just starts by doing the work. And I'm in that state of consistent work, and that you can find the love of your dreams. But it always starts with self-love.
It always starts with self-love. And when we were talking earlier before we started recording, I told you, I had to take all of last year off to make dating a full-time job. All of this is work.
It's complete work. And for all of the geriatric millennial ladies out there, it's a unique type of work because we remember the world of just casual dating before online dating. We remember the spontaneity of that, the fun of that. And then online dating took over, which is a norm for digital natives. They don't know anything else. And we have nostalgia of an old world. We have, some gratitude for the new opportunities. But I think we just have to keep embracing putting ourselves out there, whether we're married and we're deepening our marriage, whether we're single, whether we're dating, you name it.
I was so hesitant to go on a dating app because, like you said, we're geriatric. We weren't used to that. Like, I've never gone on a dating app, and I was actually calling them trash. And then in the pandemic, I felt like I had no choice. How was I going to meet anybody? And that's actually how I found my fiance. But let me tell you, it was a challenge to even fill out the form. And it's just it's so difficult for us because we are from both worlds.
We are from both worlds, and we have to acknowledge that, and then get a Gen Z girlfriend, right? That you don't always agree with, but I have a 19-year-old who I go to for social media advice, and that may sound, she's basically 20 years younger than me. And I can't believe college age students are 20 years younger than me.
I know.
But that's the reality. And so it's up to each and every one of us to keep putting ourselves out there at work, in life, in our professional world, in our community. And only by doing that will we keep growing.
And how did you know your husband was the one?
His dance moves.
Okay.
He tell you everything. No, I actually think, I would say he was willing to go on adventures with me.
I love that. And now where can people find you and get your book?
You can find me at my website, ericadewan.com, where I have my books, Digital Body Language and Get Big Things Done, where I have online courses that teach you how to be a better manager and leader. I have courses on executive presence and decoding digital communication and how to build your brand in a digital world. And for anyone that loves social media, find me on IG at ericadewan_ or LinkedIn. I also have a work guide for all of you managing remote and hybrid teams right now. I created a free 4-page toolkit at hybridtoolkit.com. You can download it for free, and it's a great toolkit to help you better establish digital communication norms at work. And we're all exhausted. We all need boundaries. So I hope you'll check it out and start using it to bring some sanity back to your life.
We'll definitely link it on the podcast. And thank you so much for taking the time to come here. And I feel like you should be famous. You need to be on the news for coming up with the word geriatric millennial.
Well, I am here. I'm currently cringing, so I'm here.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for sipping the chai with me this week. If you like the show, remember to rate, review, and subscribe. You can also find me on Instagram at Anisha Ramakrishna. I would love to hear from you. Join me next week for more chai.